The clinking of coffee cups and the low murmur of conversation filled the cafe, but I barely heard any of it. My eyes were locked on her. Meredith, sitting across from him, her head tilted just slightly as she laughed at something I couldn't hear. It wasn't the laugh itself that gutted me. It was the way she leaned toward him, like every part of her wanted to be closer. And maybe that was the first time I truly understood that I wasn't the center of her world anymore. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have, holding the door open like some lost stranger. They didn't even notice me. The sunlight caught in her hair, her hand wrapped around that ridiculous ceramic mug she loves, and all I could think was, that used to be my seat. I used to be the one making her laugh until she snorted coffee through her nose. Now I'm the guy standing outside, watching through glass like a fool. I don't know what hurt more, seeing her face light up when he spoke or realizing she didn't even glance at me when I turned and walked away. No double take. No hesitation. Just nothing. I wanted to be angry, to storm in there and drag her out, to scream at both of them. But instead, I just walked. Each step felt like my body was made of lead. When I finally made it back to my car, I sat there for 15 minutes, gripping the steering wheel like it might stop me from falling apart. Every memory of the last year hit me like a tidal wave. The late nights at work, the way she'd started wearing that new perfume she claimed was just a gift from a friend. The sudden, quiet dinners where we barely spoke. I ignored all the signs, telling myself we were just in a rough patch. God, I wanted to believe that. But now, I'm not so sure. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I circled the block like some desperate man who doesn't know what he's looking for. I even parked across the street, staring at that cafe window, watching her lean in closer, whisper something that made him smile. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out the part of me that still trusted her. When she finally left, without even calling me, I didn't follow her. I just sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon, my mind spinning with questions I was too scared to answer. And for the first time in my life, I felt small. Smaller than I'd ever felt. When Meredith came home that evening, I was sitting in the living room, staring at the blank television screen. I didn't want to start a fight right away. I wanted her to speak first, to explain something. Anything that would make me feel like I wasn't losing my mind. She tossed her keys into the bowl by the door, gave me that soft half-smile, and asked, "How was your day?" Like nothing had happened. I don't know what I expected, an apology, a confession, maybe even guilt in her eyes, but I got nothing. Just that quiet, distant voice that made my stomach turn. I tried to ask her about the coffee meetup. Was it good? I said, forcing the words out like they weren't coated in bitterness. She paused, then shrugged. Yeah, it was fine. We just talked about work stuff. Boring. She didn't even mention Elliot. Not a single word. It was like I'd been erased from the entire scene, like she was carefully building a wall between her day and me. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I just nodded like an idiot and let her walk past me into the kitchen. That night, when she went to shower, I heard her phone buzz on the counter. I swear I didn't mean to look, but when the screen lit up, I saw the name, Elliot. No emoji, no nickname, just his name. My hand twitched. I didn't open it. I couldn't. The last thing I wanted was to see the words that might break me completely. But the thought ate at me all night. What was he saying? What was she saying back? Meredith fell asleep quickly, like she always does when she's had a long day. I lay there next to her, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body screaming at me to grab her phone and find out the truth. But I didn't. I couldn't be that guy, the desperate, paranoid husband snooping through his wife's texts. So I just lay there, feeling like I was drowning in questions I wasn't allowed to ask. The next morning, she left early, said she had a meeting before work. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping cold coffee, staring at the spot where her phone had been the night before. I don't know what broke inside me, but I realized I couldn't just sit and wait for answers anymore. If she wouldn't give me the truth, I'd find it myself. I drove to that same cafe where I saw them yesterday. My plan was, I don't even know. Maybe I thought I'd see them again. Maybe I'd overhear something. But when I walked in, she wasn't there. Neither was he. I sat in the corner anyway, pretending to drink my coffee, watching every person who walked through the door like they might carry the truth on their face. And then, like some cruel joke, Elliot walked in alone. He didn't see me. He ordered his drink, pulled out his phone, and smiled at the screen. I don't know why, but something about that smile made my stomach twist. He looked too happy, too satisfied. I wanted to walk over there, grab that phone, and see if her name was lighting up his screen. Instead, I sat there, my hands trembling, thinking about every little moment I'd ignored in the past few months. The late-night work calls, the sudden gym sessions she never used to care about, the way she always kept her phone face down now. It all came rushing back like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. I told myself I was only going to sit there for a few more minutes, finish my coffee, and leave before Elliot noticed me. But the longer I watched him, the more I realized I wasn't going anywhere. Every time his phone lit up and he smirked at the screen, I felt like I was being stabbed in the chest. Was it her? Was my wife the one making him smile like that? I could almost see her fingers typing something sweet, something she used to send me before our messages turned into grocery lists and half-hearted emojis. When he left, I waited 2 full minutes before following. I wasn't thinking straight. I'm not even sure what my plan was. Maybe I wanted to confront him. Maybe I just wanted to see what he'd do next. I trailed him from a distance, pretending to check my own phone like some kind of wannabe spy, my heart pounding so hard I thought people around me could hear it. He walked toward the parking lot, and that's when I saw it. Meredith's car, parked 3 rows away. My first thought was that I was wrong, that it was just some other car, but I know that dent on the passenger side like I know the back of my own hand. I froze. My entire body went cold. What was she doing here? She was supposed to be at work. Why hadn't she mentioned coming back to this place? I felt my chest tighten as Elliot walked toward her car, toward my car, technically, since my name is on the papers. He stopped just before reaching it, looked around, and then pulled out his phone again. I was too far to hear, but I saw the smirk on his face grow wider. I ducked behind another car, my palms sweating. I knew I was being ridiculous, hiding like some desperate fool, but I couldn't move. A few seconds later, I saw her. Meredith. She walked out from the far corner of the lot, wearing that same white blouse she'd left the house in, but now it was unbuttoned at the top, just a little more than usual. She didn't see me. She only saw him. And the way she smiled, God, it was like someone had ripped out my heart and stepped on it. They talked for a moment. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her tuck her hair behind her ear, that nervous habit she always had when she liked someone. He said something, and she laughed, loud enough that I heard it from across the lot. It wasn't the fake laugh she gave me when I told one of my bad jokes. This one was real, raw, the kind of laugh that made me remember the first time I fell in love with her. I should have walked away. I should have driven home, packed my things, and spared myself the pain of watching whatever came next. But I didn't. I stayed. Because I had to know. I had to see if what I feared was real. And then, like some cruel confirmation, she stepped closer to him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. He reached out, casually touching her arm like he owned her. And I just stood there, my breath caught in my throat, my legs refusing to move, as if my body was locked in place by the gravity of betrayal. I thought about walking over, shouting her name, demanding answers. But all I did was watch her choose him over me with a smile that didn't belong to me anymore. When she finally walked back to her car, she didn't even look around. She didn't see me standing there, hidden behind a minivan like some pathetic ghost of the man I used to be. She drove away with her window rolled down, humming to some song on the radio, while I stayed in that parking lot, staring at the space where her car had been. I spent the rest of that day pacing through the house like a ghost, replaying every moment in that parking lot until it felt like I was losing my mind. Every laugh, every glance, every subtle brush of his hand against her arm. Those images were burned into my brain like scars I couldn't erase. I wanted to confront her the second she walked through the door, but when I heard the click of her keys and saw her step inside, I froze. She looked so calm, so completely unbothered, as if the entire day had been nothing more than a meeting, a few errands, and maybe some casual small talk. I stood there, leaning against the kitchen counter, my chest tight, waiting for her to mention something, anything, that would hint at the truth. But she didn't. Instead, she smiled softly, placed a bag of groceries on the table, and asked, "Did you eat lunch?" There was a split second where I almost lost it. My mouth opened, the words, "Who is Elliot?" ready to spill out like poison, but I swallowed them. I couldn't do it, not like that. I needed proof, real proof, because I knew if I confronted her with nothing but a broken voice and wild accusations, she'd just shake her head, give me that pitying look, and tell me I was overthinking everything again. and maybe a part of me was still terrified of hearing her confirm my worst fear. That night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I watched her like a detective studying a suspect. Every smile felt forced. Every casual comment felt rehearsed. When her phone buzzed, she glanced at it and flipped it face down with a speed that made my skin crawl. I tried to ask, casually, who was texting her. She shrugged. Just a friend from work. Nothing important. Then she changed the subject, asking if I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. And just like that, I felt the conversation slip out of my hands. After she went to bed, I sat in the dark living room with a drink, my thoughts running in circles. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the parking lot, the way her body language screamed intimacy, even if her lips didn't. I wanted to storm into the bedroom, wake her up, and demand to know the truth. But instead, I just sat there, staring at my phone, scrolling through old photos of us. Our wedding day, the trip to Maine, that silly selfie where we both had whipped cream on our noses. Back then, I thought we were unshakable. Now I'm not sure we're even standing on the same ground. The next day, I decided I couldn't keep waiting for answers to fall into my lap. I followed her. Yes, I know how it sounds. Pathetic, weak, paranoid. But I had to know. She told me she was going to lunch with a few coworkers. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys and trailed her car through traffic, keeping far enough behind so she wouldn't see me. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts, but I was ready for whatever I found. Or at least I thought I was. When she parked near that same cafe, I held my breath. Elliot's car was already there. She got out, fixed her hair in the reflection of the car window, and walked in without even looking around. I stayed in my car for what felt like an eternity, my mind screaming at me to go inside and demand answers. But something stopped me. Fear, maybe. Or pride. Instead, I decided I'd get proof another way. I called an old friend who works with private security, someone who owed me a favor. I asked if he could help me keep an eye on someone, just for a week. He hesitated, said it wasn't exactly legal to just stalk someone without their knowledge, but I didn't care. I needed to know. I needed to stop being the clueless husband who couldn't tell if his entire marriage was a lie. That night, I barely spoke to her. She noticed, of course. "Are you okay?" she asked as we got ready for bed. I forced a smile and said I was just tired. But inside, I was boiling. I couldn't sleep, not even for a minute. I lay there, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, wondering what I'd find out in the coming days, and wondering if I even wanted to know the full truth. The call came 2 days later, just after midnight, when I was sitting on the couch in the dark with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I'd barely spoken to Meredith all weekend. I couldn't bring myself to touch her, couldn't even look at her without feeling like I was staring at a stranger. When my friend Tom's name flashed on my phone, my chest tightened like I already knew I wasn't ready for what he had to say. "Calvin, you sure you want this?" Tom's voice was low, cautious, like he was about to tell me something that would split me down the middle. I told him I did, even though my voice cracked halfway through the sentence. He hesitated, then sighed. "All right. I had someone tell her yesterday. She wasn't where she said she'd be." I gripped the phone so hard I thought it would shatter. "Where was she?" I asked, barely getting the words out. I could hear him shuffling papers, like he didn't even want to read what was written there. "She wasn't with coworkers. She met with that guy, Elliot, right? We tracked her from her office to a restaurant out of town. They sat in the corner for 2 hours, talking, laughing. He paid. They walked out together." I felt like someone had lit a match in my chest. Did they do anything? My voice broke. I hated myself for even asking. Tom was quiet for a beat too long. "Look, I don't want to hurt you more than I have to." But they were holding hands when they left. "And there's more. Calvin," she kissed him in the parking lot. It wasn't just a peck. It wasn't friendly. I think I stopped breathing. The room felt like it was tilting, my mind running through every memory I'd had with her, every moment I thought meant something. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but all I could do was whisper, "Are you sure?" Tom's voice was firm. I wish I wasn't. After we hung up, I sat there for what must have been an hour, staring at the wall like it would give me answers. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hold them together just to keep still. I kept hearing her laugh from that cafe, the way she leaned toward him like I didn't even exist. Now I knew I wasn't crazy. She was slipping away, piece by piece, and I was just watching it happen. When she came home the next day, I almost confronted her. I almost slammed the report on the kitchen counter and demanded she explain herself. But when she walked through the door, humming softly with that same tired smile, I couldn't do it. I just stood there, my mouth dry, my heart screaming at me to say something. But instead, I asked about her day like a coward. She kissed my cheek, told me work had been stressful, and walked upstairs without looking back. I knew then I couldn't keep pretending. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down everything I wanted to ask her. I made a list, every question, every suspicion, every little thing that had been eating me alive. I stared at that list for hours, imagining what her answers would be. I imagined her lying, imagined her laughing in my face, imagined her crying and begging me to understand. None of it felt real anymore. The next morning, I decided I would follow her myself. I didn't care how pathetic it looked. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know if my marriage was already dead or if there was still something left worth saving. The next morning, I left the house 15 minutes after Meredith did, following her route at a distance like I'd rehearsed it 100 times in my head. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, and every time she slowed down, I had to fight the urge to slam on my brakes. I wasn't cut out for this kind of thing. I'm not some slick detective. I'm just a desperate husband clinging to whatever scraps of truth I can find. She didn't go to the office like she'd said. Instead, she took an exit off the highway that led nowhere near her workplace. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My stomach dropped as I realized I was about to witness something I might never be able to forget. She parked outside a small, nondescript building with no signs, just a row of dusty windows and a single side door. I pulled over a few blocks away and waited. She sat in the car for a few seconds, fixed her hair in the rearview mirror, and then stepped out, her heels clicking on the pavement like echoes of betrayal. I thought she'd go inside, but then a familiar car pulled up, Elliot's. Seeing his car next to hers was like a gut punch I wasn't ready for. He got out, grinning like he owned the world, and the way he leaned in to whisper something to her made my entire body tense. She laughed, brushing her hand against his chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up there and demand she explain what the hell was going on. But I didn't move. I stayed there, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline, every muscle in my body screaming with rage and disbelief. They went inside together, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat there, staring at that door, wondering if I had it in me to storm inside and confront them. My mind was spinning. Was I prepared to see something I could never unsee? What if I was wrong? What if this was all some twisted misunderstanding, and I'd end up looking like the paranoid fool I feared I'd become? But then, after what felt like an eternity, I saw them through the dusty window. They weren't sitting apart like colleagues. They were close, too close. Elliot reached out and touched her cheek, and she didn't flinch. She smiled. And in that moment, something inside me broke. I didn't remember starting the car, but suddenly I was driving. I couldn't sit there anymore. Couldn't be the man who hides behind a steering wheel while his marriage burns to the ground. I drove aimlessly, my head pounding, the world blurring past me like I wasn't even part of it. I ended up in some deserted parking lot miles away, gripping the steering wheel until my hands went numb. When I finally got home, I couldn't face her. I couldn't even look at her without picturing Elliot's hand on her face. So, I stayed in the garage for hours, just sitting in the dark, wondering how my life had gotten to this point. When she came home that evening, she was all smiles, like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked me how my day was, and I almost laughed in her face. I wanted to scream, to tell her I'd seen everything, but the words just wouldn't come. That night, as she slept peacefully next to me, I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, my mind a storm of rage, hurt, and confusion. I thought about Tom's report, about what I'd seen that day, and I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just losing her. I was losing myself. I didn't recognize the man I'd become, the one who lurks in parking lots and spies through dusty windows. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep living like this, pretending I didn't know the truth. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't the end. If she thought she could keep this a secret forever, she was wrong. Something inside me was starting to shift. I wasn't going to stay quiet much longer. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Meredith was already downstairs making coffee, humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, trying to find the courage to finally face her. My mind kept replaying the image of Elliot's hand on her cheek, that soft smile she gave him, smiles I hadn't seen directed at me in what felt like years. I was tired of living like a ghost in my own marriage. When I walked into the kitchen, she turned and gave me that sweet, innocent look. "Good morning," she said, sliding a cup of coffee toward me. My throat felt dry. I wanted to scream, to tell her I knew everything, but the words came out like a whisper. "We need to talk." She froze for just a second before masking it with a smile. "About what?" she asked, her tone so casual it made my skin crawl. I told her I'd seen her with Elliot. I didn't mention the parking lot or the way she'd looked at him. I just said his name and waited. Her face didn't change much, but I caught it. A flicker in her eyes, just enough to tell me she wasn't expecting that. "What do you mean?" she said, tilting her head, playing dumb. I wanted to shake her, to make her drop the act. "You know what I mean," I said, my voice trembling now. "I know you've been seeing him. I know something's going on." For a second, I thought she'd confess. I thought she'd break down and tell me the truth. But instead, she laughed. She actually laughed. "Calvin, you're paranoid," she said, shaking her head like I was some delusional child. "Elliot's just a coworker. We're working on a project together, that's all." I felt my anger rising, boiling over. "Don't lie to me," I said, slamming my hand on the table. "I saw you. I saw how you look at him. I'm not stupid, Meredith." My voice cracked on her name, and that's when I realized just how broken I sounded. She stared at me, her expression hardening. "What do you want me to say?" she snapped. "That I'm not happy? That maybe I want something more than this silence we've been living in?" Her words cut me deeper than anything I'd expected. I stood there, stunned, as she pushed past me and walked toward the living room. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the table, my breath coming in sharp bursts. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I wanted to fight back, to tell her how much I'd been trying, how I'd done everything to keep us together, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I watched her sink into the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had just happened. Something inside me cracked then. It wasn't just anger, it was desperation. I couldn't let this continue, couldn't just sit back while she slipped away into someone else's arms. That evening, I made a decision that scared even me. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it another way. I pulled out my old laptop, logged into an email account I hadn't touched in years, and sent a message to a private investigator I'd found online weeks ago, but never had the guts to contact. By midnight, I'd already wired a deposit. I lay in bed next to Meredith, listening to her soft breathing, wondering what kind of secret she was hiding just inches away from me. My heart felt like a clenched fist. I wasn't sure what would be worse, finding out I was right or realizing I'd destroyed what little trust we had left by trying to prove it. But one thing was certain. The next few days were going to break something in both of us. And part of me, the dark, trembling part one, didn't want to admit existed, almost wanted them to. The next 3 days felt like I was living with a countdown clock strapped to my chest. I barely slept, waiting for the investigator's report. When it finally arrived in my inbox, my hands trembled so badly I almost couldn't open it. I braced myself for the worst. Photos, texts, undeniable proof that my marriage was over. But what I saw instead stopped me cold. There was no affair, no betrayal. The photos showed Meredith and Elliot meeting at that same quiet cafe, but they weren't sneaking around or embracing like lovers. They were sitting across from each other with laptops, buried in spreadsheets and sketches. The kiss I thought I'd seen? It wasn't what I imagined. There was one blurry shot of him leaning close to whisper something while she laughed, but that was it. The rest of the report was a stack of mundane observations. Work lunches, late meetings, car rides home alone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, my heart pounding as the weight of what I'd done hit me. I had doubted her, stalked her, dragged myself through a nightmare of my own making, all because I let fear and insecurity take the wheel. I felt ashamed, but under the shame, there was something else. Relief so powerful I almost started crying right there at the kitchen table. I realized I had been suffocating in silence, blaming her for the distance between us, when maybe I was the one who had built that wall. That night, when she came home, I didn't confront her. I didn't demand answers or throw accusations. Instead, I asked her to sit with me. She gave me a curious look but agreed, setting her phone aside. My voice shook as I told her everything. how I'd felt invisible, how I thought I was losing her, how I'd let my own paranoia convince me of things that weren't true. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes wide and soft, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in months. When I finally finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Calvin," she said quietly, "I didn't know you felt this way. I thought you were just distant. I thought maybe you didn't care anymore." Hearing that nearly broke me. We'd both been living in the same silence, misreading each other, letting the cracks grow deeper without realizing it. We talked for hours that night. She told me Elliot was nothing more than a colleague who'd been helping her with a work project she didn't feel confident about. She admitted she should have communicated better, that she'd been so focused on proving herself at work that she hadn't noticed how far we'd drifted apart. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed her. The following weekend, we packed a small bag, left our phones behind, and drove to the coast. We walked on the beach, ate greasy food from a boardwalk shack, and laughed until our faces hurt. It felt like we were remembering each other all over again, the way we used to be before life got complicated and the silence crept in. Now, weeks later, I'm not naive enough to think everything is perfect. Marriage isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's terrifying, and sometimes it feels like you're losing everything when really you just need to talk. But Meredith and we're talking again. We're trying. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm not a ghost anymore. Maybe that's the real twist of this whole story. I thought I was uncovering a betrayal, but what I really found was a second chance.